I think that will bring a lot of sense in some of the promoters, and I think it's a very good measure, and I think everybody who has to smell the coffee should do so now.
RBI empowers banks to go for the kill over bad loans. Lenders can restructure loans by converting debt into equity if borrowers fail to meet viability milestones under the restructured plan. Hdfc Bank's Aditya Puri hails the move. Trouble for Tata Steel. The company's UK staff announces a strike starting 22nd of June, says the company left them with no choice, but still keeps a window open for further negotiations. The bears are all over the Lal Street. Sell-off accelerates as Nifty ends at its lowest level this year. Sensex cracks nearly 250 points and Nifty has lost nearly 12% from its record high. The Sun TV stock tanks after reports suggest the Home Ministry may revoke licenses to all of its 33 channels. Sun TV says it's taken aback by the report and adds revoking licenses will be like an Armageddon. Sources say the INB Ministry has thrown its weight behind Sun TV. After Maggi, the central food regulator goes after all instant noodles and pastas. Top brands like Top Ramen, Sun Feast TP, Poodles, YY among others to come under its radar. The centre nudges states as it hopes to improve ease of doing business. Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion releases a list of parameters on which states will be ranked based on the business environment. The Environment Ministry clears the 8,500 crore rupee coastal road project in Mumbai. Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis calls it a major victory. The 35-kilometre long road will connect South Mumbai with the western suburbs. And if you're waiting to get your hands on Hyundai's much talked about SUV Creta, you will only have to wait a couple of months. A special report coming up in India Business Hour. And who is the highest paid tech CEO in India? Well, he doesn't belong to the largest company. Stay tuned to find out more.
Panch was a very competent guy. I do believe he should, if he can help India with the debt market and some of these things, he'd be an excellent guy. He's got the energy, unbelievable energy.
On the 21st of May, the Deutsche Bank's top brass, including co-CEO Anshu Jain, proposed a radical management shake-up. The bank was struggling with a raft of regulatory and legal problems. Investors refused to buy into that proposal, and 2 weeks later, both the co-CEOs, including Anshu Jain, are on their way out. Good evening, and thanks for joining us here on India Business Hour. I'm Nayantara Rai and Shireen Bhan joining us from the sets of CNBC TV 18's Healthcare Awards. How did it go, Shireen?
Well, thanks very much, Nanta. I'm feeling well, I can say. We have a hall full of doctors here, so all is well. But the two headlines that I want to start with, and we have the Minister of State for Health giving away the awards here this evening. So the two headlines very quickly. One, that the National Draft Health Policy, which continues to be in a draft stage, is possibly going to be delayed even further. The government was talking about releasing that policy earlier this year, perhaps as early as January. Now it could perhaps be delayed even further. And also the government is very, very keen and very intent on strengthening the regulator, the FSSAI, which is involved in the whole Maggi controversy, overseeing the Maggi controversy currently. The government intends to give the FSSAI much more teeth. Those are the two headlines coming in here from the Minister of Health. But we've got a packed show, Nantara, so take it away.
Well, let's start with the big story of the evening, Shireen. We're going to discuss the healthcare of banks. Banks have been given a major boost when it comes to their ongoing battle against bad loans. The Reserve Bank has empowered banks to go for the kill by allowing lenders to convert their dues into equity should promoters default on restructured loans. Of course, this can happen only if a majority of the lenders agree to that move. Lata Venkatesh now joining us with the details. Lata, this is being seen as a significant step. What is it going to mean for banks who are struggling with rising defaulters?
Well, let me begin at the beginning. In February 2014, the Reserve Bank had already given banks guideline that even as a loan begins to show stress, that is, loans are not paid for 31 days or interest is not paid for 62 days, that is for 2 months overdue, the bankers should create a joint lender forum and start checking what can be done to improve the account or recover the asset if nothing happens. Now what the Reserve Bank is saying is that for cases under this JLF and for the legacy cases under the corporate debt restructuring mechanism, what banks should do is in every case of restructuring, when they give more money or more time to repay, they should put in a clause saying that if the promoter does not meet the milestones, that is, I will sell so much assets by so much time, I will reduce the debt of my company by these levels, or I will produce so much sales or produce so much EBITDA or reduce losses. If any of these milestones are not met, the lenders can get together again and convert their loan into equity. A clause to this effect must be put in all restructuring cases. And once they don't find those milestones happening, they must convert that, they must call a review meeting and within 90 days must convert that loan into equity. And since they will then have 51% equity, they will be able to find a new promoter and sell it off. Now, this loan conversion into equity should be also authorized, allowed by the shareholders of the company that is likely to default or that has been defaulting. This looks like a very good proposal to ensure, to put the fear of God into the minds of promoters, because if they don't perform according to their milestones, they will lose control of their company. But on the flip side, the negatives are what happens if the bankers, what happens to legacy cases where the clause is not there? Secondly, what happens if the promoters don't agree? It's quite possible that the bankers can say, I will not give you a fresh loan. But very often, bankers themselves don't want the promoter to become an NPL because that makes their books look bad. And at the moment, many of the PSU banks are suffering for want of capital. So it is in their interest to roll over the loans. Again, all the bankers may not agree. Some bankers may have a fear that I don't want this to become NPL. Some bankers may be aggressive. So even agreement within bankers has always not been coming. So these are the problems that can stymie the process. But the Reserve Bank has done its level best to make it possible. The existence of such a rule will definitely empower the banks, and also the loan conversion is at a very attractive price. Until now it used to be the 6-month price of the stock, the average of the 6-month price. Now as soon as the decision to convert is taken, that will be the reference date, and the 10-day average price preceding the decision will be the price at which it will be converted. That makes it attractive. So it looks like it has a very good chance to work, but only for prospective cases. I spoke to the HDFC Bank Managing Director and CEO Aditya Puri on these and other issues. Let's listen into a slice of that conversation. Now, bankers can convert their debt into equity at a price that is not linked to the SEBI formula and therefore at a lower price. Do you see this working enough to make bankers take control of the company?
I think more than bankers taking control, a lot of the promoters will realize they're going to lose their company. And it's not going to be that they carry on with their equity. Their equity is going to go. And I think that will bring a lot of sense in some of the promoters. And I think it's a very good measure. And I think everybody who has to smell the coffee should do so now.
Actually, now the Reserve Bank is taking one step even further, saying that if after a corporate debt restructuring, the companies or the promoters don't bring in their share or don't perform according to the standards promised, the banks can simply ensure enough shares are issued so that they get 51% stake and they can sell off the company.
But Lata, don't you think it's reasonable? First the banks lent. Then you ran into difficulty. The banks sit with you and take you at face value and give you a restructuring. And if that restructuring is in cuckoo land, then I think you should pay for it.
Well, that's Aditya Puri giving the Reserve Bank's guidelines a big thumbs up, saying it's time now that errant promoters learn to smell the coffee. Joining us is another banker of the IDBI Bank, Mr. R.K. Bansal. Mr. Bansal, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. We've just been articulating a lot of the positives that this Reserve Bank guidelines do have as far as banks are concerned to deal with the problems of NPAs. But what do you envisage as the practical problems when it comes to implementation, sir?
See, some problems we may encounter, but the one problem which I envisage immediately is this requires that this clause should have been there in the agreement of restructuring. We do have this clause in our restructuring agreements, but that was normally, in case of default, we can convert the defaulted amount. Or in CDR cases, we have a condition that WCTL or FITL can be converted 100%. In some cases, that may be sufficient, but in some other cases, that entire loan amount may not be possible to be converted in the old cases.
Right, you're saying the legacy issues cannot be dealt with, and that is what we were articulating as well. But in terms of whether you see bankers being able to agree on some of these issues, whether you see resistance from shareholders because the shareholder approval will be necessary in order to incorporate that clause into those agreements, what do you foresee as challenges or problems on that front?
So one challenge which I am envisaging is that this basically we are saying that if restructuring we do, that this should have all these references and milestones, which are difficult within 6 months to 1 year to be looked at from milestone perspective. And as you rightly said, shareholders will have an issue. They may resist in such cases, and restructuring could become difficult.
Also, I think one of the big highlights of these guidelines is the fact that once banks get 51% equity, they must sell this to a new promoter. Do you think that this is, in a sense, going to put the fear of God now on errant or defaulting promoters?
Certainly, yes, there will be fear. But then, of course, we also need to see that whether we can really find these new promoters, and at that point of time, whether banks are ready to take some haircut. Because finally, you may have to sell it based on that.
Absolutely. Those are going to be some of the practical challenges that banks will need to contend with. But as always, Mr. Bansal, appreciate you joining us here on CBC TV 18 with your quick take on the RBI restructuring guidelines that were announced earlier this evening. This is a significant change in dealing with the problems of bad loans and dealing with the problem of errant defaulters, Nentara.
That's right, Shri. Now let's go on to the other big story we're tracking in India Business Hour. Labour trouble for Tata Steel in the United Kingdom. The workers' union of the company's steel plant have decided to go on strike beginning the 22nd of June, but the unions still reiterate they're open for further negotiations. Sanjay Surina joining us on the phone line from London. Sanjay, unions are refusing to budge. They're pretty clear on what they want as far as pension goes, and this will probably be seen as a significant blow to Tata Steel. 60% of its revenues come from Europe.
Well, it is a significant blow to Tata, but if the union leaders are to be believed, and Roy Ruckus, who we spoke to, is the head of the unions, he suggests that, in fact, there is no communication. We had the impression that there have been hard-nosed negotiations, and as a consequence, there still is no resolution. But this is a suggestion, and needless to say, it has been measured against any statement from Tata on this and their view on this. But so far as the union leadership is concerned, they say that they're not even talking enough, that they are not even been able to sit down to any meaningful talk. So that, if that is a, yeah?
Please go ahead, Sanjay. Okay, I think we seem to have lost the line with Sanjay over there, but that is the breaking news that of today as far as Tata Steel goes. The worker unions announcing that they will begin strike from the 22nd of June. They will inform the company of this on the 16th of June, and starting then, they will work only normal hours. There will be no overtime. Here's Roy Ruckus, one of Tata Steel trade union, explaining the reasons for them to go on a strike.
We're not in talks with them because they're not talking to us. So it's very difficult to have negotiations with a company that doesn't talk to its workforce representatives. So in light of the fact that they do not want to talk to us and have meaningful negotiations, we have no option. The company have pushed us and forced us into a position where we have to announce the industrial action that the workforce intend to take after what was a very, very strong vote for industrial action by the workforce.
Well, that's trouble there for Tata Steel, as CNBC TV 18 had first reported on the possibility of a strike, and that indeed has come through today, with the union deciding to go on strike unless and until there can be further negotiations with Tata Steel. But let's talk about a story that's just breaking. It's flashing on your screens, Nentara. You know, there's been a lot of talk around the possibility of that Kane-Vedanta merger. The company has on record said it's a possibility that they're looking at, but it'll be sometime in the future, so on and so forth. What are you now picking up? Is the merger discussion gathering momentum?
That's right, Shri. Not only is it gathering momentum, I understand the boards of both the companies, as Kane India and Vedanta Limited, could meet as early as this weekend. Sources indicating perhaps it's going to be on Sunday to talk about that possible merger. I also understand from my sources the top management of both companies from Kane and Vedanta had discussed this. The weekend that's just ended, and they did that in Singapore. They're already reaching out to all kinds of bankers. For example, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch and JM have also been involved in all of these talks. Do you remember when Vedanta Resources had bought out Kane India via what was then Sterlite? It had said it would want to ultimately have a merger in place. There's also a tax overhang when we talk about this merger, and that's to do with Kane Energy PLC. Don't forget that company has been slapped with a tax notice. So it's going to be interesting to see the structure of this merger and how the tax man is going to agree to this as well. At one point, Anil Agarwal was quite keen that Hindustan Zinc also be merged in with Vedanta to create a mega energy come metal conglomerate, but that seems to be on hold now, given the fact the government still has a significant residual stake in Hindustan Zinc. So big headline, of course, coming in this weekend. You're going to see the boards of Kane India as well as Vedanta meet to talk about that merger, and this is an ideal time to talk about the merger as far from Vedanta's perspective, and that's because Kane India and Vedanta Limited share price are virtually the same. Of course, it's too early to talk about swap ratios, how the company may want to actually hand out something to the minority shareholders, but the timing couldn't have been better for Vedanta.
The Kane-Vedanta merger possibility around this weekend. That is the sense that we get from our sources. But when we reached out to both companies, they haven't responded yet to CNBC TV 18's queries. But this is a story that we'll be tracking closely, and we will continue to do so. But let's talk about a stock that was hammered out of shape today. We're talking about Sun. The stock lost over 20% on the back of reports that the Ministry of Home Affairs had decided to revoke or could consider revocation of Sun's licenses for its 33 television channels, and that's because the Ministry of Home Affairs feels that the charges against the promoters of pending investigations qualify or equate with a threat to national security. Now, government sources tell us that the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, which is really the nodal ministry at the heart of this matter, is not in favor of a revocation. In fact, sources tell us that the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting doesn't agree with the views of the Ministry of Home Affairs. But on this issue, we spoke with S.L. Narayan, the CFO of the Sun Group, and he was very, very clear that they had not heard from the government. They hadn't been given a chance to represent. In fact, going on to say that they had never really applied for renewal of their licenses, that their licenses are valid till about 2021 in most cases. S.L. Narayan saying that if this were to indeed come through, it would be an Armageddon event for the Sun Group, because it would virtually mean a blackout of Sun TV's channels. Listen in.
I do believe that we will not come to that stage, because it seems to me that this may well be a vicious rumor, but let's assume that we do reach a point where something like that, I mean, God forbid it will be an Armageddon event, but if we do come to that stage, I do believe that there are sufficient recourses for us to get protected. I still believe that some very sound democratic institutions are alive in this country, so we will get the protection from the appropriate courts. Recently, we did have a situation where the Ministry for Home Affairs did not give the security clearance for our radio business, some of the radio stations. And we understand that the Ministry of INB has written to the Ministry of Home Affairs requesting them to reconsider that decision and recommending issue of the security clearances. I mean, I'm not supposed to be knowing this, but we understand this from the verbal averments that were made by the Council for Government of India before the Madras High Court. So I would imagine that Ministry of INB may not necessarily toe the line.
Well, that's S.L. Narayan, the CFO of the Sun Group, saying that they have got no information from the Ministry of Home Affairs on the possibility of a revocation of the 33 licenses for their television channels. All of Sun's profits come from those 33 channels, and so it's going to be, as Mr. Narayan said, an Armageddon event as far as the group is concerned. But this is the twist in the tail, so to speak. As I pointed out, what we are picking up from our sources is that the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, which is the nodal ministry in this matter, is not in favor of a revocation, not in favor of a ban. And also our sources tell us that why single out the Sun Group? Because if you look, there are several promoters who run television companies, who run media companies, who do have charges against them, and hence why single out only the Sun Group. Let's go across now to our colleague Rituparna Bhuyan, who's been tracking that story. Ritu, a clear difference of opinion between the INB Ministry and the Ministry of Home Affairs.
Yes, it seems like a Home Ministry versus the INB Ministry issue. What the Home Ministry is maintaining is that because charge sheets have been filed against promoters of Sun TV, hence it will not be extending the security clearance. But INB Ministry has been maintaining that even though there have been charges that have been filed against the promoters of Sun TV, that does not mean that national security is at stake. Because of which the security clearance has not been extended. Moreover, the INB Ministry also pointing out that there are similar cases against other promoters of channels, promoters of other channels as well, and hence it is not proper to just single out one particular channel. Of course, what will now happen is that the INB Ministry will have to take a final call on what happens to the Sun TV channels. According to the Home Ministry, the Home Ministry maintains that it is the INB Ministry who will take the final call on if to take those channels off air. But INB Ministry is clearly not in a mood to take the Sun TV channels off air. So clearly we can see more back and forth between these two departments regarding the Sun TV issue, and we'll have to wait and see which opinion prevails going forward. With that, it's back to you.
And meanwhile, the Sun TV stock was down by about 21% in trade today. And as Ritu was just pointing out, the INB Ministry of the view, it's not fair to single out one channel at all. Moving on to, and there was a complete bloodbath on the Lal Street today. No respite for the bulls after a harrowing week, which ended with 4% losses. This week has also started off on a rather disappointing note. Let's talk about the Nifty first. That's precariously close to 8,000 mark, and after losing 1% in trade today. Incidentally, today's closing level for the Nifty is the lowest in 2015. Onto the Sensex. That cracked by 250 points. The sell-off accelerated towards the end. Sonia Shenoy joining us to wrap up today's trading action. Sonia, bears were all over the Lal Street today.
Oh yes, it was a very disappointing session for the markets. One actually saw it coming, last week the Nifty was under pressure all through the week. There was no respite, and today as well, from the word go, the market was under pressure and we didn't see any recovery through the trading session. Now the Nifty has lost about 12% from its all-time highs. So most traders believe that this is a mini bear market that we're in a longer term bull market. Remember that 8,050 level that we broke today was a crucial support level that most were watching, and now we come to that sacrosanct level of 8,000 on the index. If that gets broken, then all hell could break loose in the market, and we could see a lot of panic selling on individual stocks. But today, if you look at what took place globally as well, India continued to underperform markets like China. So today, China was up almost about 2% and now for the year, the Chinese market is up almost 60% versus the Indian markets down about 3% And the consensus view is that at least in the near term, China is a better tactical bet than the Indian markets. However, coming back to our own markets, in terms of the stocks today, the biggest losers were the banks. PNB, Bank of Baroda, IndusInd Bank, Hdfc were all under pressure, all falling about 2 to 4% apiece. Oil and gas was not too far behind, so Cairn, Reliance, BPCL were under pressure as well, all down anywhere between 1 to 3%. And metals, Vedanta, Tata Steel and Hindalco saw cuts of around 1 to 3% or so. Gainers, there were just a handful of, motley bunch of stocks. So NMDC, Bajaj Auto, Tata Power were just a few stocks that ended in the green today, while on the mid-cap end, the stock of the day clearly was Sun TV. That stock was down almost about 22%. And so as you can see, big gashes there. Adani Enterprises too down about 13.5%. And then names like Nagarjun Construction, Unitech, Canara Bank and Union Bank were under quite a bit of pressure. So seems like there could be still some more blood on the screen. Watch out for that 8,000 level closely on the downside. Back to you.
All right, Sonia, thanks very much for joining us. In fact, one stock that continues to be under pressure on account of the Maggi controversy is Nestle. It lost further ground today. And now the FSSAI has actually extended the scope of its investigation. So it's looking beyond Maggi and looking beyond Nestle. It is now going to be looking at 8 other instant noodle and pasta makers, including Foodles from GSK and ITC's Yippee. Priya Seth gets you more.
The noodles are getting sticky. Even as Nestle is trying to firefight and resolve the Maggi controversy, several other instant food manufacturers now find themselves under the regulatory heat as well. In what seems to be an industry-wide crackdown, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India has ordered thorough test of 8 major brands of noodles, pasta and macaroni. Along with all the 9 variants of Nestle India's Maggi noodles, 4 variants of Maggi pasta will also undergo checks. Beyond Nestle, the scope of the investigation has now been extended to brands like Ruchi International's Coca Instant Noodles, CG Foods India's YY Noodles in 3 variants, GlaxoSmithKline's Consumer Healthcare's 10 variants of Foodles, 2 variants of AA Nutrition's Yummy Instant Noodles, Indo-Nissan Foods Top Ramen Atta Noodles, and 3 variants of ITC's Yippee Noodles. Following the initial confusion and conflicting state FDA test reports on Maggi, the FSSAI has now defined 4 broad parameters that will form the basis of the test, which will be conducted by state food and drug administrators. Apart from visible parameters like fungus, insects and rodent contamination, samples will be tested for ash, nitrogen and moisture content levels. Since high lead concentration was one of the key reasons for the ban on Maggi, the authority has sharpened scrutiny, directing state FDAs to test for presence of 7 metals in the product samples. Naturally occurring toxic substances like aflatoxin and agaric acid will also be tested for. The Food Safety and Standards Authority of India has directed all state food and drug administrators to submit test results by the 19th of June. Interestingly, the order has put a big question mark over the fate of brands which don't find a mention in the list of products that will be tested. The order says, and I quote, "The safety of all such products in these categories has not been assessed as the product approval procedures. As such, the same are unauthorized and illegal and cannot be intended for human consumption." End of quote. The advisory then goes on to direct state FDAs to recall, remove and destroy all such illegal products. In Mumbai with Priya Seth, Prerna Barua.
While other noodle makers also under the FSSAI scanner. 142, that's India's ranking in the coveted World Bank Ease of Doing Index, which ranks 182 countries. And the government has decided to put its might behind improving India's ratings. But to do that, they will have to get state governments to do their bit on the ground. And how exactly does the DIPP intend doing it? By injecting some good old competition. Rituparna Bhuyan gets you that story.
Move over cooperative federalism, say hello to competitive federalism. States vying for the interest of prospective investors will now be ranked by the DIPP on the basis of how business-friendly they are. The department today released a set of parameters which will be used to rank the states in terms of their ease of doing business. States will be assessed in 8 broad parameters which include setting up business, allotment of land and obtaining construction permit, complying with green procedures, complying with labor regulations, obtaining infra-related utilities, registering and complying with tax procedures, enforcing contracts, and carrying out inspections. The department has asked the states a set of 285 questions. These include queries like, does the state issue a single ID to business entities for purpose of all state taxes? Does the single window system have an online portal for filing, payment, and approvals? Are incentives under the industrial policy provided as a service through the single window system? On its part, states will have to answer the questions either as a yes or a no and will have to submit proofs of business-friendly initiatives. According to sources, the final results of the initiative could be released in mid-July, and DIPP officials maintain that the states will be free to use the results to pitch to prospective investors. The move comes even as India's overall ranking in the Doing Business ranking of the World Bank will come up for scrutiny in mid-July. Of the 10 parameters in the World Bank Index, India's ranking is below the 100th rank in 8 of them. This is what the Modi government wants to change, as it has targeted to be amongst the top 50 nations in the Doing Business Index of the World Bank. In New Delhi, with Rituparna Bhuyan, Ashmit Kumar.
Well, the ease of doing business, injecting some good old competition, that's the DIPP for you. But tomorrow promises to be an exciting day. Watch out for Tata Steel. Remember, that stock is going to react to the news that came in late this evening that the union has decided now to go on strike. Also watch out for Kane and Vedanta, where we understand from sources that talks on the possibility of a merger are gathering momentum and could in fact reach some sort of a climax as early as this weekend. And of course, watch out for stocks like Sun TV and Nestle that continue to be news-driven and under pressure. But from all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.